Let me ask you something that might shake you a little. If your body disappeared right now and your thoughts went silent, who would remain? Who is the one behind the eyes? Who has been watching your entire life unfold? Through chaos, through ecstasy, through heartbreak, through numbness. You might say, well, that's me. But what if I told you the me you think you are is only a fragment, a character, a simulation running on autopilot, a shadow of your true nature? Because the truth is, only 1% of people on this entire planet ever make real contact with their higher self. Not the self you perform, not the self you're praised or punished for, but the self that is eternal, infinite, and already free. And the craziest part? It's not hiding. It's been whispering to you every single day of your life. You were just never taught how to listen. And right now, I want to take you on a journey. Not a theoretical one, not a motivational one, but a real one. One that could change everything for you if you're ready to see beyond the veil. Because we've been raised in a world that has trained us to believe we are only what we can see, touch, or think about. We're told to chase success, status, validation, and even spiritual achievements as if awakening is something to earn. But the higher self doesn't care about any of that. It's not impressed by your followers, your intellect, your rituals. It's only waiting for one thing, your surrender. And that's where the 99% get stuck. They try to achieve their way into awakening. But the real path, it's not about gaining. It's about remembering. It's about unlearning. It's about dying before you die, so that what remains is truth.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
When I say higher self, I'm not talking about some mystical being floating in the cosmos. I'm talking about you, stripped of illusion. The you that existed before you were named, shamed, praised, molded, and conditioned to be what the world needed you to be. The higher self is not separate from you. It's the deepest, most unshakable center of you, the part that has never been wounded, never been lost. It's the part of you that chose this life, that designed every challenge, every heartbreak, every awakening, not to punish you, but to activate you. And here's the insane part. It's been trying to reach you through everything you've resisted, your pain, your confusion, your breakdowns, your failed plans, your loneliness. These weren't detours, they were invitations. But most people miss the invitation. Why? Because they're still looking outward. We scroll, we consume, we chase dopamine spikes. We try to escape silence like it's death. But silence is the language of the higher self. Stillness is its temple. And if you can't sit with yourself without needing to be entertained, distracted, or validated, then how can you ever meet the part of you that transcends all of that? You can't hear the truth if your mind is always screaming. And you can't see clearly if your eyes are always looking for something to fix or blame. The higher self speaks in whispers, in nudges, in synchronicities so subtle that only a still heart can notice. But once you begin to tune into it, life becomes unrecognizable. Not because everything changes around you, but because you change. Your perception sharpens. Your intuition becomes undeniable. And suddenly, you're not reacting to life, you're co-creating it. Here's what most people don't realize. Your higher self is always guiding you, but it will never force you. It honors your free will. It allows you to learn, to fall, to stumble, to forget, because it knows that forgetting is part of remembering. That's why your life has felt like a loop sometimes. Ever notice how the same problems keep showing up in different forms? Same type of relationships, same kind of triggers, same self-sabotage cycles. That's not bad luck. That's the curriculum of your soul. And the moment you stop blaming the world and start asking, what is this trying to teach me about me? That's the moment you begin to rise into alignment with the self that already knows the lesson. That's when the loop breaks. That's when the fog lifts. That's when the 1% path reveals itself. But the path isn't easy. It requires radical honesty. You have to be willing to confront the parts of yourself you've hidden. Not just from others, but from yourself. You have to be willing to feel everything you've suppressed for years. The grief, the shame, the fear, the rage, because your higher self doesn't just exist in light, it exists in wholeness. That means nothing can be left behind. Not your trauma, not your guilt, not even your ego. You don't transcend the ego by killing it. You transcend it by integrating it, by loving it, by seeing through its fears and choosing differently. This is where the real work begins, not in escaping the human experience, but in embracing it fully, while remembering you are the consciousness experiencing it. And then something wild begins to happen. Your external life might still be chaotic. You might still face loss, uncertainty, and pain. But there's a stillness inside of you that nothing can touch. You stop needing control. You stop needing certainty. You stop needing to prove yourself. Because your identity no longer rests on the shifting sands of personality or preference. It rests in presence. You become like a mirror, clear, reflective, unmoved, yet deeply alive. And from that place, everything changes. Your decisions become aligned. Your energy becomes magnetic. Your relationships become sacred. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally being who you really are. And that's when you realize this was never about becoming something more. It was about becoming less of what you are not. So the question I want to leave you with right now, the one that could unlock everything for you, is this. If you stop performing, stop pleasing, stop pretending, who would be left? And could you sit with that version of you long enough to fall in love with it? Because that's where the connection begins, not in perfection, but in presence. And if you can stay there, even for a moment, you've already entered the 1%. The veil between worlds, how to enter the state where the higher self lives. There is a space inside you, a thin veil, barely perceptible, where the human and the divine meet. Most people never cross it. They live their entire lives circling around it, brushing against it in moments of awe or heartbreak, but never quite stepping through. But when you do, when you truly cross that veil, even for a second, you are never the same again. You no longer ask if the higher self is real. You know, because you felt it, an intelligence so ancient, so loving, so infinitely aware. It makes your ego feel like a grain of sand on an endless beach. But getting there doesn't require a spaceship or a pilgrimage to some remote mountain. What it requires, brutally and beautifully, is your presence. Your full, undivided attention to this moment, to this breath, to this now. Because the higher self doesn't live in the past you regret or the future you fantasize about. It only lives here. And most of us are never truly here. To enter that state, you must begin the sacred art of slowing down, not just in action, but in perception. You need to disrupt the trance of urgency, that inner voice that says, "What's next? What's next? What's next?" is the voice of the programmed mind. It's the voice of the matrix, of the false self trying to outrun its own emptiness. But the higher self waits in stillness. It speaks not in commands, but in clarity. And when you slow down, when you breathe with intention, when you sit in silence without needing anything to change, you begin to tune in. You start to notice things you've never noticed before. The way your body holds tension, the way your emotions rise and fall like tides, the subtle sensations that were always present but drowned out by noise. This is not spiritual fluff. This is energetic reorientation. You are learning to feel again, to listen again, and in that listening, the veil begins to thin. But as the veil thins, you will face resistance, internally and externally. The ego doesn't want you to cross over, not because it is evil, but because it is afraid. It knows that once you remember who you really are, you will no longer be controlled by fear, shame, guilt, or comparison. You will no longer be programmable. And so the mind creates distractions. It tells you you're wasting time. It replays old stories. It creates cravings, urges, restlessness. It will even use spirituality as a disguise, making you obsess over rituals, crystals, or techniques, just to keep you from the simplicity of presence. But the higher self requires none of that. It just wants the real you, not the spiritual persona, not the seeker chasing the next big insight. Just you, as you are, naked, unfiltered, fully surrendered. That's the paradox. The more you try to reach the higher self, the more you miss it. It's not a destination, it's a remembering. And when you finally remember, when you stop fighting what is and simply merge with it, you'll feel something wild. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that has nothing to do with getting what you want or avoiding what you fear. It's like stepping into a river underneath all the noise, where everything is flowing exactly as it should. From that place, decisions become effortless. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You no longer need to convince anyone of anything, because your energy speaks louder than logic. People will feel it. They may not understand it, but they'll be drawn to it. You've become a conduit, a bridge between worlds. The world of form and the world of spirit. And that, more than any title, accolade, or awakening experience, is the real goal. To live from your higher self while still walking in your human skin. So let me ask you now seriously, are you willing to let go of who you think you are, so you can remember who you've always been? Not in theory, not in concept, but in your breath, in your choices, in your stillness. Because the higher self doesn't shout, it waits. It waits for you to stop running, to stop seeking, to stop pretending. And in that pause where nothing is forced and nothing is performed, you finally hear it. The voice beneath the noise, the presence beneath the personality, the you that was never lost, only forgotten. That's the real miracle. Not that the higher self exists, but that it's always been with you. Patient, loving, ready. And now that you're listening, it begins to speak. Living as the higher self, becoming the rarest frequency on earth now that you've begun to recognize the quiet voice of your higher self. The real journey begins, not the journey of seeking, but the journey of embodying. Because it's one thing to touch the higher self in a moment of stillness, during meditation, or at the edge of a breakdown when your ego cracks open and grace seeps through. But it's another thing entirely to live from that space. To walk, breathe, speak, and decide as the higher self in the middle of traffic, in the heat of conflict, in the silence of loneliness. This is where only 1% truly arrive, not because they're special, but because they're committed. Because they've chosen to no longer abandon themselves in exchange for comfort, approval, or familiarity. Because they've realized the rarest frequency on earth is a human being who remembers they are divine and chooses to live like it. But don't mistake living as the higher self for perfection. It's not about wearing white robes, speaking softly, or pretending to be above your emotions. The higher self doesn't reject your humanity. It enhances it. It doesn't detach from life. It dives into it with full presence. It laughs. It cries. It feels everything deeply, but it doesn't drown. It watches the waves of emotion pass without clinging or resisting. Living as the higher self means you no longer react from your wounds. You respond from your wisdom. You no longer abandon yourself to fit in. You anchor yourself so deeply in truth that the world begins to shift around you. You become a field of coherence in a society built on fragmentation, and people feel it. Even if they don't know what it is, they sense something ancient and familiar in your presence. That something. The embodiment begins with your choices. Every moment becomes a fork in the road. Will I choose fear, or will I choose presence? Will I react from the old identity, or respond from who I truly am? These micro decisions matter more than any grand act of spiritual awakening. Because your higher self doesn't care how enlightened you appear. It cares about how aligned you are. Do your actions reflect your essence? Are your boundaries rooted in love, not protection? Do your words carry the frequency of truth, not performance? This is where the path gets subtle. Because the ego can mimic spirituality. It can wear the mask of wisdom, but the body knows. The energy doesn't lie. And when you live from the higher self, even your silence speaks volumes. One of the clearest signs you're embodying your higher self is how you hold space for others. You stop trying to fix them. You stop needing to be right. You stop projecting your healing timeline onto their process. You begin to see people, not as roles, not as problems, but as souls in their own sacred unfolding. You can love them without attachment. You can walk away without resentment. You can listen without waiting to speak. This kind of presence is a revolution. Because in a world addicted to reaction, a calm, grounded, deeply attuned human being is a miracle. You become medicine, not because you're trying to save anyone, but because your very being reminds others of what's possible. You don't teach through theory. You transmit through embodiment. And yes, there will be tests, constantly, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the universe sharpens you through contrast. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be tempted by comfort. You'll face moments where the old you wants to come back and take control. And sometimes it will. That's okay. The higher self doesn't judge your slips. It simply invites you again and again back into alignment. Each time you return to presence, you strengthen the channel. Each time you choose truth over fear, the signal gets clearer. Until one day, it's no longer a practice. It's just who you are. Not because you've become someone new, but because you've finally stopped pretending to be someone else. Living as your higher self is the ultimate act of rebellion in a world built on illusion. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's transformational. It means you trust your inner knowing more than external noise. It means you choose peace over performance. It means you walk into every room not needing to prove anything because you are everything. And this isn't arrogance. It's clarity. The higher self knows its worth because its worth isn't tied to anything that can be taken away. Not money, not beauty, not status. Its worth is inherent. And when you embody that, you become immune to manipulation. You become unshakable, not because life stops testing you, but because you remember who you are in the middle of it all. So I leave you with this. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting to be ready and started living as if your higher self was already in full command? What relationships would fall away? What truths would you finally speak? What creations would pour through you unfiltered? Because the truth is, your higher self is not a future version of you. It's the truest version of you that's already here. All it's waiting for is your permission, your surrender, your willingness to stop shrinking and start shining. And once you make that choice, not once, but every day, you join the 1%. Not above anyone, but deeply rooted in your own divinity. And from that place, anything becomes possible.